You're tuned in to Getting to the Root of It, focusing on healing and letting go of the wounds of addiction and other unresolved traumas of the past. Your breakthrough begins with you. Are you ready to change your life? Stay tuned as your host, expert therapist, personal development coach, and spiritual cheerleader, Natashah Khan, inspires you to live the life you were destined to live.
This episode of Getting to the Root of It is sponsored by Transcendent Living. And if you'd like to have a more in-depth conversation regarding domestic violence, maybe you have been a victim of domestic violence and looking for a way out, or just needing someone to talk to, you can reach out to Nefretiri McGriff at nefretiri@transcendmylife.com. Again, you can email her at Nefretiri, NEFRETIRI @transcendmylife. That's TRANSCEND mylife.com. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Getting to the Root of It. In this episode, I have a very special guest I'd like for you guys to meet, and I will be introducing her shortly. It's a dear friend of mine that I went to grad school with, and we've known each other for quite some time now. She is an amazing woman of God, and she's got a heart of gold, and she has an amazing testimony and story to share with you guys today. So I hope you guys are ready so that you can sit back. Today, our topic is focused around raising awareness for domestic violence. It's a conversation that happens, but I don't think we outwardly really speak about it publicly. Many of us may speak amongst ourselves and in smaller groups. My girlfriend today, that is my guest here on the show, we felt it was very important to raise awareness, speak about it publicly, let it be known that, there's so many men and women alike that are in domestic violence situations and oftentimes don't know how to get out of those situations. And sometimes many have lost their lives as a result of domestic violence. So today I felt it was a story that was near and dear to my heart. And with my special guest, she has been what I would say was once a victim of domestic violence, but she is truly, truly a survivor and an overcomer of her experiences. And I wanted to bring her on our show today so that she can share with you her story and her experience. Hopefully she'll show her strength through her experience and also provide you with some hope that if you are going through this, or if you know of a loved one, family or friend, or maybe it's your next door neighbor that may be struggling with this, hopefully we can share this information and give a message of hope to others that we can get out of these situations and circumstances and truly live the life that we're called to live. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you guys to Miss Nefretiri McGriff. Again, dear friend of mine. She is what I call my bestie. She is loyal all day long. She has just been there for me every step of the way in my own journey. And she has been a huge part of many of the obstacles I've had in my life and getting me to overcome those obstacles. And so I want to introduce her, allow her to tell you a little bit about what she does today and where she's from, and then we're going to get her to share her story with us. Nef, how are you?
I am honored, first of all, to be on your platform to talk to the people. Very, very honored. How are you?
I am good. I'm just excited to have you here. Like when I think about us in grad school and what we were planning to do with our career and where we've come to today, it's just so amazing, and it's so great to have you here. So
it is. Hey everybody, Nefretiri, as Natashah said, I am Nefretiri. I am a mental health expert, certified trauma professional, a certified life coach, and I'm also the founder of Transcendent Living, and that is a space for people to get the holistic healing that they need for the next level of evolution. And so with that in mind, it's just helping people to create the narrative that they want, because so many times life and people in our very circles create our narratives. And so we find ourselves living up to that. And so the life that you want is waiting on you. You just have to create it. And so helping people create their narratives is kind of the gist of what transcendent living is all about.
And you are the right woman for the job, let me just say. But go ahead.
You're too kind. So in my personal experience, I was exposed to domestic violence at a very early age. And then being exposed to that, I do believe that set kind of the tone and the tolerance that I had for the abusive relationship that I found myself in. And, I'm one of those people that I don't share my story with everyone. And so kind of being on this platform and writing my book, or writing the chapter in the book that I'm in, the anthology, was more so of a sense of freeing myself, just the embarrassment that came along with it during that time. If I were to tell someone about it, that who I thought would be very supportive or understanding, I kind of got I knew it. And like, well, what did you know? Or it's I can't believe you would let something like this happen to you. And so
I'm sorry to interject there.
No, you're good.
And we hear that often a lot, right? We often hear like, man, I thought you were stronger than that. Like you would let that happen to you, So I can relate to that. I've had that happen to me before. People like, well, I thought you knew better, and why would you let that happen? So how did you respond to that?
Back then I shut down. I felt even more embarrassed. And I felt like a victim. I literally dove into that victim mentality. And I saw that was not the place for me. It wasn't meant for me. Even though it happened to me, that's not who I was. And so when I started to see different people's reaction to it, I had to protect myself. I had to kind of stop sharing those things with them, and find people who either had been through it or could empathize in a different way with me. And even some of those people were, some of the people, I'll just be honest, my mother, I told her what happened, and being the fact that she had been in that, she just kind of glossed over it. And again, this isn't to demonize my mother or paint a bad picture of her, but this is real. It's the reality of it. And I do believe part of the reason her response was the way it was is because two things in mind. One, she had been through that, and she probably felt a little responsible for me taking that same path. And then two, a lot of her decisions led me to move away with this guy. So it started out with me and the guy being very friendly. I won't even say very friendly. Like when I met him, I didn't pay him any attention. I was just like, okay, another guy. Well, and so I started to see him more often, and he started to talk to me, and I'm just like very nonchalant, because I wasn't interested in him. I wasn't interested in dating. I was just, as the younger folks say, I was about the bag. I was literally focused on how do I grow into my independence. And so with that, I was very young. I wasn't even 21 when I met him. I was 20, and started to see him more often. And he asked me, a little bit about myself, and to keep it very surface, I said I was doing music, which I was at the time. And that was the thing that we had in common. So we kind of grew a friendship off of that. And then he became like this friend who kind of like a guidance type person. I won't say a guidance counselor because he didn't counsel me, but he was more so of I would say a protector. So he would check on me. Hey, how you doing? Do you need anything? And I thought, wow, he's a pretty nice guy. Like, and I won't lie, I was into his swag and all of this. And so all of these things, I'm like, wow, I got a guy like this paying attention to me. Oh, I must,
So let me interrupt and ask you this.
Mhm.
Prior to meeting him, were there any had you ever experienced that before? You ever experienced that feeling of someone making you feel like you mattered, or that you were of value, or that you were important? And so let's answer that question first, because my follow-up question is then, what made this guy different, or what made this guy special?
Mhm. Going back to being a child, or recalling my experience in my childhood, I had brothers. I still have brothers. So I have brothers, uncles, father. However, I never truly felt protected. Not saying that, it was certain brothers that, if I said I had an issue with, depending on the kind of issue, things would kind of move along and action would be taken. But unfortunately, the theme of our family is we don't really talk about true things, or we don't talk about things that can get ugly. We just
we keep it on the surface.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's a custom that, I've seen in other families dealing with, youth and at-risk families. So to say that I was surrounded by men, but I never felt that level of protection. I never felt that level of attention. And it felt great. It felt like, wow, I am valuable. And so with him showing me that, and then him being a little bit older, so there's more experience there. And the fact that, okay, well, he's more experienced, but he's still interested in me. He's calling me beautiful. And not that I haven't been called beautiful before, but he said it in a different way. He said it to where it kind of felt like he was speaking to my soul. And I was very smitten. I was very, very but I played it cool. It's just like, okay, whatever. And again, like I hadn't experienced his kind of swag before. I've heard about it, but he was from New York and he was of mixed race. So I was like, oh, pretty boy, and he a little gangster. Ooh, and that saying of good girls like bad guys, I was living that example of it. Because it was, for me, he was taking all the risks that I was afraid to, in some sense. I was, and still am, a person who plays it very safely. And so I think that's what attracted, his I don't really care attitude is what attracted me to him. And with him being so protective and, so caring and so doting, it's just like, oh, wow. And so as time went on, we didn't date. We knew each other for 4 years before we even considered dating.
Oh, wow.
He was honest with being in relationships with, other women. And I'm like, okay, cool, because I liked him, but I didn't see myself in a relationship with him.
So
during that time.
Is it fair to say that you guys developed a friendship over those 4 years?
We did. Or so I thought.
Okay.
I was under the impression that what we built, the things that he shared with me, the things that he let me see, and notice I said not showed me, but the things he let me see, I thought those were real. I thought he was a person who had his life together, even though he was doing music, but he showed me that, he was a responsible person. He showed me that he was a family man, and those things were not true. I didn't know to the extent of how deep he was in the streets until I was with him as a girlfriend. And by that time, I'm like, well, I'm here now, like, and maybe if he sees the path that I'm on, maybe I can change him.
Oh, here it comes. Right.
Right. And
that
so
good girl meets bad guy, and she's hopeful that somewhere along the path, he's just going to change the error of his ways.
Yeah. But I started to change. I started to pick up certain habits that he had, like smoking. I didn't smoke, but I was like, oh, he looks so relaxed. Let me take a puff. And, you know, finding out that, okay, this doesn't work for me. Like the smoking, nah, okay, you can have that. But the nightlife, you know, certain habits that he had of going out every night. And I'm like, well, did you used to do this before we got together? He was like, no, not really. But hindsight, yes, he did. And so I would find myself out at the club. And I'm not a party person, but I would find myself trying to fit into his world because I'm like, okay, he likes me so much. He's including me. Why would I reject that invitation? Why would I reject it? It's going against everything in my being. Everything in my being is screaming, get out, stop. This is not you. But I ignored it because I felt accepted. I felt like, wow, here's an invitation from a guy who seemingly is a very likable guy. He's tough, all of this. And so he's saying I'm his. He's claiming me. And it felt good to the ego. But my spirit was saying, but I ignored spirit. And so fast forwarding past that, we got into a situation where my mom didn't like him from the start, but I couldn't rely on that because she really didn't, and we'll talk about that another time. But
before you go any further, and don't lose your train of thought. So in a lot of the episodes to my shows that I've had, we talk a lot about past experiences, promote these negative beliefs that we carry. These negative beliefs then attribute to feelings that we have that leads to maladaptive behaviors. And in the cycle of cognitive dysfunction or cognitive distortions, it all stems back to our primal needs. And I've heard you say a couple times that you felt protected. And one of the things that I want to ensure that the audience is hearing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, in this time now, even though your insides are screaming, this isn't for you, this is not who you are, you shouldn't be doing this, I want to recall what you said earlier, that in those 4 years prior to this friendship, you felt protected. And that is a primal need, right? That is a need that we all need to feel. We need to have guidance. We need to feel safe. We need to feel protected, not just physically, but also emotionally. So is it fair to say that even though your insides were screaming and your intellectual mind says, this is not right for me, because that primal need was being met, is it fair to say that's what led you to hold on and go against your values, your morals, and or what you knew to be true?
Absolutely. That was the main thing that was keeping me there. That need, it felt like he was speaking to my soul. It felt like he knew all of the things that I was deficient in and he supplied it. That's what it felt like. But I will say, on the other hand, I kind of wanted to show my mom that I could do it better. I wanted to show her that, you don't like him, you don't know him. You had your issues with men, but I can do this better. I'm going to show you that you're wrong about him.
I'm going to be different.
Yeah. And ended up in the same situation. And kind of leading back to that, my mom did not like him, but she tolerated him. And I couldn't really feed off of that because, again, we'll talk about it in another segment. But she really didn't like anybody who tried to get close to me. Especially guys. It was just kind of like, my daughter's too good for you, which I can appreciate now. However, I do see that there was some excessive undertones with that. But, she and I, we had an argument, and I'm leaving out so much because I know we are short for time. So I'm trying to give you the meaty parts, but she and I, we had a disagreement. She was not thrilled at all that I was going back to him because I had ended up cutting things off with him, and she saw the decline in my thrive. She saw the decline of me. But I just was just like, I'm just sad because we broke up. I'm thinking it's just depression, but she saw more than that. But she didn't know how to communicate that to me. So, long story short, she kind of told me, hey, if you want to be with him and his family, go. Leave me out of it. I'm done. And, give me my key back, because I was living with her at that point. And that's what drove me to move out of the city and go try and start a life with him. And so with that pushed me that made me even more determined to make it work.
Sure.
And so when we get up there, actually backtrack a little bit. The reason why I called things off is because he grabbed my wrist. We were having a conversation about how I was going to get to work. And this responsible guy that I knew started to turn into this, I'll say it, leech. And so it felt like I was kind of taking care of him. But in a sense, I'm like, oh, he needs me. Ooh, and so again, it's feeding the ego. But I'm kind of sick of it too. I'm like, gosh, what happened? Why does he now decide to get to fall on hard times with me? But again, that whole, I fell in love with that potential. I fell in love with the image that he gave me. And so it's always there. It's always attainable in my head. No, it wasn't. It was a lie. And so when I was telling him, I said, I need my car to go to work. You're going to have to figure out whatever else you're going to do. And you know how I talk. It's not disrespectful, but it is kind of like, look here.
You tell it like it is. You tell it like it is. You keep it real.
And with that, he grabbed my wrist and he's like, who the F you think you're talking to? And I'm startled at this point. And I'm like, so I paused. I said, and he said, I'm sorry. And I looked down at his hands around my wrist, and I kind of looked up at him. He said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And it felt genuine. That apology felt genuine. It felt sincere. His face, he looked like he was on the verge of tears. And so I said, okay, he's under stress. I made excuses for it.
So let me interject there. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it fair to say that it may have felt or been perceived genuine because you come back to this idea of who this man is or who you want him to be or the potential of who he can be? Again, coupled with the idea that this is a man who's protected you for a really long time, right? So these are all the different thoughts that are still running through your mind. Again, is this what then keeps you holding on?
Yep. I saw the image that he created for me. I saw that through every single fall, that every single thing, every single hand grab, every single push, every single choke, every single punch. I saw that image he created for me. And I wanted that so badly. And what tends to happen in relationships like this is we want the violence to stop. We want the relationship. We just don't want the violence with it. And so keeping hope out for someone like that is a very dangerous thing. And so but I hadn't shared with my mom how he grabbed my wrist, because I knew she probably would have lost her mind, and he would have been unalive. Let's just say that. So, fast forward, we get to our new city, but we are kind of living like slum. No offense to, anyone, but we were living in an extended stay, and I wasn't raised like that. I wasn't used to that lifestyle. But as we're there, I'm starting to learn so much more about him. That was the life that he was used to. I didn't know that, because I didn't see him every day. We didn't talk every day, but when we did, it was frequent enough for me to not forget about him. And so I'm seeing that he's very familiar with the people at the front desk. And I'm like, what? So I'm confused, and I'm trying to figure out like what's going on. And it finally comes out, oh yeah, I've had to live here a couple times because things didn't work out. And so those are my friends, blah, 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 blah. And so now I'm just like, okay, I already had a job lined up. And went to the job interview. He was extremely excited for me. And I'm like, okay, so what are you going to do? Are you going to pick back up construction and da, 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 da? He's like, oh, I'm thinking about it. I got this gig that I'm going to do. It's office setting. So I'm tired of working in construction. So I'm like, oh, wow. No, he got the office job, but it was a scam. He was scamming people. And I didn't find this out until like months later, So here it is. I'm thinking, okay, I'm working where I'm working, and it was at a courthouse. And he's working his office job. So we're good. And so now the thing to do is for us to get out of this extended stay. Now things are looking up, like, okay, maybe this could work. I had one of my coworkers say that she had a vacant home that no one was living, vacant, and I could rent it out. And so I told him about it. I'm like, hey, I found us a place to stay, and told him how much rent was going to be. And he's like, oh, I could cover that easily. Great. He never covered one bill, because it was always something after the other. And the way that he spoke to me, you're not being, he was telling me, you're not the same person I used to know. You used to be so understanding. And so here's where it starts to set in. And I'm just like, okay, well, maybe I'm being a little too harsh. Maybe I am being a little too harsh.
Now he's got you questioning or doubting. What he doesn't realize is that the circumstances have changed.
Right.
The days of you being understanding, you guys were not in a relationship, and you weren't exposed to what you're being exposed to today.
Mm-hmm. And that 21-year-old, that 20, because I met him when I was 20. So actually, that 26-year-old didn't think like that. It's just like, okay, well, maybe I am being too harsh. And honestly, I'm just going to keep real. I don't want to be in my head. I don't want to be that angry Black woman that men are always saying that's prevalent, So I'm like, I'm going to be different. I'm going to do this the right way. And so, and again, I'm leaving out so much, because there was a time where, I felt so unsafe with him that I jumped out of the car while he wasn't going too fast, but I jumped out of the car. We were on the turnpike, and I walked, and I said, just leave me alone. And I actually started to walk the opposite way to go back home. I was determined at that time, however I got to get home, I'm getting home. And he left, didn't see him. And so I thought I was okay. I'm like, okay. And then next thing I know, I see his friend on the turnpike. He's like, hey, get in. I know he can be this and I know he can be that, but he really loves you, da, 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 da. And, it's just, it was those mind games. It was the lack of the control that he had over me. Like if I spent too much time on the phone, he would start to question who I was talking to. He went through my phone. Oh, I see you spent a lot of time on the phone with this person. I see that, the dishes aren't washed, but you're on the phone. There were times where he would be out 2-3 days. I would call. Hey, where are you? Where are you? And he would say, I got to get this money. And so at that, during those times, I'm like, okay, this is not the man that I thought he was. He doesn't do what he says he did. He never did construction, ever. And these kinds of things would come out in his apologies to me after he's done something wrong. The biggest thing that I can remember was he thought that I was cheating. And he would always say, you work up there and it's a lot of guys that come up there and you're on the phone and this, that, and the third, and I know you're cheating. And it got to a place in my life where I was like, you must be cheating because you're always accusing me of this. And he was. I don't think there was ever a time in our relationship where he was not cheating. This is what he did. I found out that there were women after me that this is what he did. But when he thought that I was cheating, and at that time, I couldn't take it anymore. And I said, you know what, anything would be better than to be with you. And that's when he got up and he grabbed me. And he grabbed me by my hair and he drugged me down the hallway by my hair. And so I'm screaming and I'm crying and he opens the door and he pushes me out of the door. And so at this point I'm banging on the door and I'm like, let me in, and he has it locked. And so after maybe a couple minutes, because I don't want to make a scene out in the neighborhood. I don't want to be the statistical Black woman in a relationship like this, So I gather myself and I start to walk off. He comes out and he's, cursing at me. Where do you think you're going? All of this. And so he pulls me back in and he yanks me and he pushes me on the bed, starts to choke me. And I just kind of stop. I stop fighting and I just look at him and he's like, oh, you think this is a game? And I said, no. I said, honestly, you've killed my spirit. So do what you got to do. And he pulls a gun out and he cocks it back. And he says, don't play with me because I can and I will. And I said, do it. And I meant every syllable of that because I was tired. I was so tired. I didn't feel like, I felt like I lost so much of myself trying to help him find himself, trying to wait on that person that he created for me to believe in. And I even told him at some point, I said, you know what? I used to be able to trust you to protect me. Who's going to protect me from you? So it's so much more that happened. But what I can say is that there was one coworker in particular who I trusted and I talked to. She did make the comment of, I knew it. I knew this was going to happen because she saw the debacle he made at my job. And with her saying that, it kind of made me, question, okay, you're supportive, but then again, you're saying this. And so I backed off. I stopped sharing things with her. I felt very isolated. I wanted to go home, but I didn't. I tried to make it work. He went to jail. I tried to make it work. I ended up.
If I can interject there, looking back on that today with everything that you've learned through your academics, your personal experience, you working in the field, what I have to ask the question, because I'm sure a lot of people, other people in the audience are asking this question, what made you want to stay and make it work after what you just described? Because I have to tell you, as you shared that story, I got chills. I cannot imagine, and I've endured some abuse of my own in my life, but I cannot imagine being, staring down the barrel of a gun and just telling someone, just do what you got to do, right? So you go through this horrific experience, and yet you come out the other side with this, I want to make it work. What do you think, looking back, is made you want to stay to try to get it to work?
Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. Transcendent Living was created by a deep desire to transform the lives of women that have been excessively exposed to adverse and painful events in their childhood. Transcendent Living provides therapeutic relationship coaching services that help create a supportive connection that strengthens recovery, redefines the atmosphere of safety, breaks the limits placed on wholeness and freedom, and treats the whole person and not just the symptoms. If you are suffering from challenges brought on by physical, psychological, sexual, and emotional pain and discomfort that prevents you from walking in your truth and living authentically and unapologetically, please reach out to founder and certified life coach of Transcendent Living, Nefretiri McGriff, today via email at nefretiri@transcendmylife.com. Remember, your limits are only what you set them to be.
What made you want to stay and make it work after what you just described? Because I have to tell you, as you shared that story, I got chills. I cannot imagine, and I've endured some abuse of my own in my life, but I cannot imagine being, staring down the barrel of a gun and just telling someone, just do what you got to do, right? So you go through this horrific experience, and yet you come out the other side with this, I want to make it work. What do you think, looking back, is made you want to stay to try to get it to work?
I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed of what people would say. I knew you couldn't do it. And honestly, I had never heard that in my life. I've always heard, you can do it. You're so great. And seeing that as a challenge, seeing it ego, because here I am thinking that I am a powerful enough being to change this man. You are not God. You are not a sacrificial lamb. It's not your responsibility. And I had to learn those things. I had to swallow my pride. I had to stop holding out hope, stop looking at potential, and see the harsh, raw reality in front of me. And that's when I had enough, and I left.
Can we also add to that I think oftentimes in those situations, and I can speak for myself, we look at it as if we failed in the relationship.
Absolutely.
Right. So when you talk about, you've grown up always hearing that you can do anything, and here's the situation or the circumstance that's not working. And oftentimes that negative belief that comes up is, I failed at this, right? I could have, I could do anything, and yet I can't seem to make this right. Right. I think it's important for our listeners out and anyone out there that is struggling with this issue to understand that you have not failed at anything.
Right.
It's about you being able to wake up and realize the situation that you're in. You don't need it. You don't deserve it. And it doesn't define who you are as an individual. It doesn't make you a good person, a bad person. It just means that is not where you need to be.
Right.
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 So can you remember the defining moment that said, with all of this in mind, you have this person that started off as a friend, this person who was a protector of you, then he turns a corner and it's like almost a Jekyll and Hyde. You see this different individual, despite the chaos, despite the abuse, you go back to the relationship. What was the turning point for you to say, enough is enough? I can't do this anymore, and I have to leave, win or lose?
The fact that I was homeless, I was essentially homeless. It was during the time that he was in jail. Unfortunately, and I will never hold this against her. The coworker that allowed us to rent the home, she said I had to leave, because she didn't want that kind of activity there. And so during the time that he was in jail, I was homeless. I was still going to work. Took a shower in the gym, but I slept in the car in different hotel lobbies. And I actually left that city and came back home to visit, and ended up going back because my job was like, hey, we know what you're going through. It's okay. Come back. We won't, we want to keep you here. And so I felt like I had, started new friendships, and I was like, okay, maybe I could start a new life. And then he got out of jail. We went to another extended stay, and I ended up losing my job because of just the chaos that was going on. And again, I felt embarrassed. And when I looked at how my life was, and I said, this is not who God intended me to be.
Amen.
This isn't my life. I don't know whose narrative this is, but it ain't mine. And one very important moment that happened for me was I was having a text conversation with my father, and he and we have a very interesting relationship. It's very estranged at times, but I can recall that I was having a text conversation with him, and we weren't talking about my situation. I forget what it was that we were talking about, but he sent a message saying, don't wait to make the right decision because it'll never be the right time. Just be decisive and do it. And I took that as, yeah, I gotta go. Because even in those it was two moments where I told him, just kill me. But in that moment, the feeling was very real and it was very raw, but kind of not being in that moment and being in my in the state of mind that I was of just, how do I fix this? What needs to happen? And I sat back and I thought, and I said, it's not time for me to die, because there's so much more in me that I have to give, not to him though. And that's when I decided, okay, I'm not living in hotels anymore. I'm not, fussing with someone who is clearly not in his right mind. I can't do this. I can't do this. And I won't do it. And that was a turning point for me, that text message, and then me just taking an overall assessment of my life. And that's not who I want it to be. That's not the trend that I wanted to start.
Well, my listeners know that I'm all about God moments. And when I wrote my chapter in that anthology, Fabulous, Fierce, and Free, I talked about God moments. And I'm going to say what I'm hearing with your text conversation with your dad and what he said, that was a God, for me, that's
Absolutely.
a God moment. Right?
Absolutely.
That is
God used that because I was praying and I said, God, you got to give me a sign in a way that I can receive it. And I'm very specific when I talk to God. God, you know your daughter. You know me. Okay. You got to send this to me in the way that you know that I will receive it. Because if it's coming from someone that I really don't deal with, I'm going to miss it.
Yep.
If it has to be, God, you got to package this for me, because you know me. And it was packaged in such a way where I was like, yeah, this is it. This is it.
It was like it was just screaming. It was just so loud and clear. And this is just another example that God will do for us what we can't often do for ourselves.
Absolutely.
Or things that we have no business trying to control. Right? It's God's will, it's God's path. And you're absolutely right when you said earlier that this is not the life that God has called you to live.
No,
and I hope for our listeners out there today that we all understand that we all have purpose. We are all chosen. We're all gifted in so many ways. And there's a life out there waiting for us that God has called us to walk, a path for us to walk. And I hope for anybody that's out there that's sick and suffering or struggling or caught in any type of an abusive relationship with domestic violence situation, that they would seek some help. And I know that it's difficult. I worked in investigations a few years ago and had worked in domestic violence cases. And oftentimes, the individual, for whatever their own reasons are, typically don't press charges, or they'll get in a fight and then they'll stay together. But at the end of the day, we have to come to a place to realize that this is not it. This is not what we're called to live, to be living in the dark shadows, or to be controlled, or to be mishandled and abused by anyone. None of us, there's not a human being that walks this earth that deserves to experience or have to continue to experience that type of life. So as we wrap up our show today, and again, thank you so much for coming on. And I'm going to say, as long as I've known you, I've heard the story, but you sharing that today with me, it just sent chills down my back. It saddens me to know of how many men and women alike do experience this on a daily basis, and oftentimes don't feel like there's any way out. So if you can say anything to anyone out there listening today that may be struggling or have been a victim of domestic violence, or have gotten out of the situation, but still experiencing the victimization maybe in another way, what would be your message of encouragement or hope for them today?
So for those who have been able to leave and be free of the violence, don't go back. If you can trust yourself enough to be able to make it, you will make it. Because if that door has been opened for you to leave, once you leave, shut it. Don't open it back, lock it. Don't throw away the key, whatever it is. Because going back and forth will continuously break away pieces at your core. It will continue to deteriorate who you are as a person. And you matter. You matter. If you're still in it, you matter too. You matter. It's not your fault of what's happening. It doesn't mean that you're weak, because abusers don't go for weak people, because that the part of the game is to take a confident woman or confident man and strip them of that, and then maintain that control. So it doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. And that's what a lot of times we feel like when we're in this. What am I doing wrong? It's not you, it's them. But the overall thing is making sure that you are safe. There's a lot of websites out there that when you are searching for help and tips for DV, they'll often remind you, hey, your record, your search route, your browsing history is being tracked. So, they'll say exit out safely here, or something of that nature. If you need to go to a shelter, do that. If you need whatever you need, but you have to start to shift your mindset and realize that you are the prize. You have to realize that you have something to live for. It's you. I see your tagline is your breakthrough starts with you. And that's so real. It's so real, because if we are looking for God to do something in our lives, we got to give him something to work with.
Amen.
We have to give him something to work with. And so finding that support group. And then, I will say one of the things that worked for me was letting them know, hey, if I use certain words, that means he's around me. So, I'm either going to have to tread lightly, or that means I need some help. And I've seen certain situations where, people have called in for food, and, you're calling to a burger place, but they're asking for pizza, and then people catch on. But if you have to get creative to stay alive, do that, because the world needs you. You have purpose. I hate to say it this way, but it's very true. There is purpose in your pain. But you have purpose. You matter. I can't say it enough. You matter. And once you get to that place where you trust yourself enough, and that's all that has been stripped of you, is the trusting yourself. Because what happens is when we're led to depend on other people, we put more trust in them than we put in ourselves. And so when you start to trust yourself enough to make the right decisions, to understand that what I feel is a natural response to what I am going through. Because even with emotions, we feel like I shouldn't be feeling like this. Yes, you should. You should.
Those are your feelings.
Yeah.
So we can talk about this forever, and I'm definitely going to have you back on the show so we can talk about this some more. I think this is great conversation. I would like to know if anyone out there that's listening wants to reach out to you just to have a conversation. Maybe they just need to share the situation that they're in, or maybe they've come to that place where they realize that they do matter and that it's time for them to, move in a different direction. How can they reach out to you?
You can email me, Nefretiri. I'll spell it for you. Nefretiri at transcendmylife.com. Nefretiri at transcend, TRANSCEND, mylife.com. And then once you send me an email, we can take it from there.
All right, guys. So everyone who's listening today, you've heard it from my bestie, Miss Nefretiri McGriff. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your heart with us and sharing this experience. It's one thing to experience it, and it's another thing to come out of it and then be able to openly and honestly share your heart and share some of the deepest, darkest moments of your life and scariest. But I thank you so much for your courage. I thank you so much for the hope and the faith that you instill in another human being. And, I always say we just need a mustard seed of willingness, right? So we just need a mustard seed of love for ourselves, or value for ourselves. Or if you are women out there, or anyone out there that have children, at least have that mustard of willingness for your children to get out of those situations, and know that there's someone out there that is willing to lend a helping hand to get you the help that you need. So if anyone wants to reach out to me, you know where you can find me at empoweringvoices45@gmail.com. You can also, if you're having any disputes or conflicts within your relationships as a couple, you can also follow me or find us on collaborativehealingpartners.com. This has been a wonderful episode. Again, Nefretiri, thank you so much. Listeners, I thank you to you so much. Thank you for being fans. Thank you for checking in and listening in every week. I just want to say thank you and God bless. Everyone, have a great day, and I will be launching another episode next week. Take care. Hi, my name is Natashah Khan. I am a personal development coach. I am a published author, motivational speaker, and I'm here with an opportunity for you today. Do you ever sometimes feel sort of stuck, not really sure where you're heading in life, or looking back on your life and thinking, I didn't quite always accomplish the things that I wanted? Do you struggle with fear and or anxiety, or you worry all the time? Or maybe you find yourself constantly giving to everyone else, but never really taking time to give to yourself. Or maybe you identify as a codependent and you realize that it's time for you to stop giving so much of yourself to everyone else and to stop and take time to give back to you. Well, you've come to the right place. On Monday evenings from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, I host a group that is a private group, so it's invitation only, to members who come together to begin to support each other, lift each other up, inspire each other, and learn the tools necessary on how to find their freedom, how to empower their voices, speak their truth, and discover their authentic selves. So if this sounds like something that you are interested in, you are welcome to reach out to me via email at empoweredvoices45@gmail.com. Again, that is empoweredvoices45@gmail.com. If you are looking to change your life, you are looking to transform and live the life that you've been destined to live, please don't hesitate to reach out today.